All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to our live stream. Today, we are talking about stress or silent science. And we've gotten in conversations this week, Betty and I, about stress, about, what brings that on. Having a short fuse might be the look in some of it. But prevalent in our whole health arena of health-related challenges is what we've termed stress. And the belief we got to keep it to a minimum, the belief that it's a big issue, and it's an infringement, really, on our freedom to be whole, joyous, and free. Characteristic of the belief that, hey, we're part of the human race. I'm just a person. There are lots of people, and nobody really escapes this whole stress thing. And so Betty and I were talking about this and looking at this, and stress, it seems to me, is when I've got a lot of not I out there in my world. When things come up and I think, that's not me. That's over there. They need to get their, sorted out. Or I've got too much coming at me. I can't possibly handle all this. I get a short fuse. Not I out there. I'm not owning that. I'm not the world I walk through. So whenever our personal concept of ourself, the view we see in the mirror, is occupying thought, we are setting ourselves up for a problem. And it manifests as this thing we call stress. We forget we're viewing a mere concept or a point of view. We've forgotten that man, the reflection of the God idea, exists divinely. We've bought into a belief that our language percept is real. So welcome, Betty. How are you today?
Pretty good.
Excellent. How would you like
You tempt me to quote from Living Consciously with Dr. Dorsey.
Let's do it.
Because you forget that there isn't anything out there that isn't the self, the way I see it.
Yeah.
We live our infinite being in the look of others, but there aren't any others. That's our others. Right. My others are not your others. You have a set of your own others all the way around the globe.
Right.
And when you're living as if that out there were affecting you, you forget that you're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
The thing that affects you is who you're being as right. You, friends, world, job, driving the car, cooking dinner, etc. It's all one thing going on. Divine being all there is, being you. And how are you doing with all that? Do you know? We forget that over there is not outside of who we are. So we don't take charge. We sit around and be a victim of our own stuff. Stop it,
Yeah, it's a wake-up call for sure. Now, what I'd like to let everybody know is that we would love, if you're enjoying this, we would love a heart, a like, a thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel and support it. It helps YouTube find other people that this will resonate with and broaden our audience. And so overall, it's super helpful. So thank you so much for being here. All right, so let's dive into what we've got prepared today. From Christian Science Re-Explored, Margaret Laird on page 62, start on line 3, wrote, God is a word for power, presence, law, observable in human affairs as man. So say how that has to do with stress, Betty.
Well, I was addressing what's a fact. And whenever you're not in touch with the facts, there's stress. Because you're believing the two-legged animal's got this to do and that to do and is responsible for it and better do something about it and better take care of it and oh dear, and who's going to fix it?
Yeah.
And that kind of behavior and that mindset, so to speak, is what they call stress. And there's so much of it apparently at present in the world today that the health officials are saying it affects your health. And I thought, well, heck. Just believing that you're a two-legged animal affects your health? You bet it does.
Yeah.
And that's why we wanted to talk about what are the facts of being for you and for me and for all mankind.
Yeah.
And that's what science is all about. So that's why I presented Mrs. Laird's statement telling you what God is. And then I left the note underneath it that tells the very same sentence. And that's what man is. There is no distinction in quality at all between what we define as God and what we define as man. The distinction, if I can call it that, is that one is causative and the other one is a reflective presence of the action. The God idea is the law, the presence, the power, reflectively present instantly as the action of that ongoing being is what we call man.
Yeah.
And so everything that is true of God is true of man. So the only time we run into the possibility of stress, which is apparently a very flamboyant expression these days in our life, is when we think that the thing we see in the mirror, the thing that shows up to play the game of human living, we think that thing is causative. And we forget that that's our best view of a reality that's divine, perfect, whole, complete, joyous, free, right now.
Yeah.
And in that belief that the picture I'm looking at is the power, I've really deprived myself of my freedom. So I want to keep repeating this general idea. Kim says I'm too formal. But anyway, I want to say get off it and get on with your life. Because life, capital L-I-F-E, is a synonym for the God idea. And reflectively, it identifies man. Man is the identification of God being. So whenever you're not being that, you don't know who you are. You're playing a game with yourself. And you're losing.
That's always the game you lose when you believe that this is who you are. Yeah. In a world of others that look and somewhat interact with you.
Yeah, I know. And it's doubly hard when you look around you at the world that you walk through and think, well, if only they would do it differently, life would be better for me.
Right.
If only you would live yourself as you are, life would be perfect. Right. Because that's what it is.
Right.
Any of that other stuff isn't going to amount to anything for you.
Right. And in Science and Health,
it's very simple, but it's very direct.
Yes. And in Science and Health on page 116, starting on line 30, Mary Baker Eddy said, an infinite mind in a finite form is an absolute impossibility.
That's right.
So if we live ourselves as this two-legged animal and think that's all there is to us, and then it's all not I out there, we're trying to live a finite form with the infinite capacity. It can't work. You're going to have discomfort.
Yeah, you're living with the belief that this thing can somehow invoke an infinite capacity, forgetting that the infinite capacity is what you've got showing up as this thing.
Right.
Do you know that's
right? You've got it backwards.
That's right.
Right.
And really, dominion in living is in having your facts straight, and then the hell with the look.
Right. Yeah, we get it backwards. There's a couple of examples, but the one that crept into my brain that you might go, I don't know about that, but crept in my brain, so I'll share it right here, is that it's like you're the fish on the hook, but you think you're the fisherman.
You think you're the fisherman.
You think you're the fisherman that casts the reel. You've got the hook in your mouth. It's like you think that this thing is
that's the view this thing has of itself.
Yeah. Right.
But you are the fisherman seen as going fishing.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, might not be the best analogy, but at any rate, it's what came into my head. All right. And then you, Betty Albee, in Mind is the Athlete, wrote, this acknowledging reality requires setting aside our attachments, our judgments, opinions, and considerations while viewing scientifically the world we walk through.
Yeah. And when I say viewing scientifically, that those are kind of formal words, but it just means look all around you. From the standpoint of being the source and condition expressed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that imagine if we could drop our attachments and our judgments and opinions. What would then be possible? What would then show up in the space, that the void that would leave could be something matching closer to reality with a capital
Yeah,
I.
and it may sound like a mountain to climb, but then when you give up just a teeny itty bitty, just for a minute, you get a glimpse of that fact of who you are. The freedom is huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
It moves mountains.
And letting go of our attachments and judgments and opinions. This is just funny because in my business, we've been exploring this whole Chat GPT thing. I don't know if anybody else has heard about Chat GPT, but from a marketing perspective, everyone thinks, oh my God, it's going to take over all the copywriting and all the marketing writing and all this stuff. And we started playing with it. And we actually did a webinar last week, a couple different presentations, and now we've got a video on our YouTube channel. But at any rate,
about your business.
Yeah, Chat GPT. So this is the thing. So you think there's this intelligence, artificial intelligence, and you can just ask a question and it'll just write you your blog post. And what we've learned is it's a lot garbage in, garbage out. And a lot of garbage in, garbage out. It depends on how you relate to it. So if you give it stuff that you've already got, like your perspective on the world and that kind of thing, it can be tremendously helpful at giving you some new eyes to look at it with. Very interesting. But if what you do is you ask it for stuff and it gives you stuff, but you've got an attachment to what you think the title of something ought to be or the way it ought to be worded, and then you sort of nudge ChatGPT, well, what about this title? It'll butter you up and say, oh, that's a great title. And it'll tell you all the good things about it. And then I got back from one of my folks, well, ChatGPT said this was really good. And I said, yeah, it's not. We're not doing it. And it was really funny because it was like, wow. So you shape the world you walk through with your attachments and with your judgments, with your opinions, and with the way you think it ought to be. Your world will say, yes, thank you very much. I can show up like that. And it does, to reinforce and make you right, because you're going to be right. And it's going to make you right. And I just looked at it in this microcosm of Chat GPT. And I'm like, yeah, it'll just make you right. It will. It'll tell you how great all that stuff is and what great ideas you have, even if they suck. And
the human experience is a world of agreement.
Yeah. And it's just very interesting. So I've been cracking myself up. We've done a lot of learning about how to get the best out of it and how to really use it well. But it doesn't replace your being, the being you. It doesn't replace that thinking that's infinite, the capacity to understand. It can give you some new views, which is very interesting if you play with it. But otherwise, garbage in, garbage out. You feed it, you take it, and then you want to blame it over there. Well, it's what it said. And it's the same thing that we do in our living. Well, so-and-so told me, so therefore it must be true. And it was in the New York Times, so therefore it's gospel. It really
is. It's well named.
Huh?
It's well named.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence.
Exactly. But it's kind of fun. So as you look at it, when you're saying, set aside our judgments, our attachments, our opinions, our considerations, while viewing scientifically the world we walk through, while viewing it from source, from acknowledging the divinity present that can only have you experiencing exactly what it is. And if you can drop all that stuff, dominion, freedom.
And you know, the thing is, we make it a big to-do to humanly drop this or that. It doesn't compute that way.
Yeah.
What happens is that you get into a situation that looks difficult or challenging, and for just a second, you say, wait a minute, what's running the show here? If all is infinite mind, infinitely manifest, then I don't have anything to worry about. And that second changes the whole picture for you.
Yeah.
It's the acknowledgement of a scientific fact when you're confronting a human problem that gives you some leeway, gives you a break, lifts you for a moment. And then you move on and you have it again and again and again. And it's called living life.
Right.
It never stops. But sometimes we stop. We get lost in the picture for a while until something wakes us up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
All right. And believing you're a lump of stuff with limited intelligence, external to consciousness, you live as a victim of your beliefs about the world with no possibility of real choice. Again, that's from Mind as the Athlete on page 20.
Yep.
All right. Moving into the next one with Margaret Laird on Christian Science Re-Explored, page 62, starting on line 28. Margaret Laird wrote, whoever uses the concept as a pattern for human behavior turns away from the Christ or divinity of his own being. And you do with that not I. It's the same thing, isn't it? Whenever I use a concept as a pattern for human behavior, then I say it's over there, it's out there.
Yep.
I'm turning away from the Christ or divinity of my own being.
Well, and in terms of your first example, if you're going to trust artificial intelligence, you got a problem. You can play with it. It can be a game player, but it doesn't come from the stuff that you're manipulating.
No.
Intelligence and understanding constitute your being. They aren't something you can manipulate, but you can play a game with it.
Or you can ignore it, and that'll come back to,
Ignoring doesn't ever help anything.
No, it just comes back stronger, more. Oh, yeah? Here you go.
Yep.
All right. And the scientist who is science has left the dimension of human history and its repetitive concepts. Reality is what is seen, heard, felt in and as individual language.
Yeah, we really get into thinking there's something bad out there. Me playing the game with all the stuff that's going on around me, like that's wrong. It's not wrong. You can play the game. Just know that you're playing the game. Don't trust it. Have fun with it, but don't trust it. Trust what comes intuitively, what comes in the understanding. Don't trust the look. Don't trust the beliefs you got about it.
Right.
It's kind of a balancing act you're doing as a human being. This knowing what's going on is divine principle present. Betty playing the game is playing the game. Don't forget that. You're playing the game. Good. Have fun with that. But you don't rely on it. You don't trust it. You just play with it. Like I don't trust an ice cream cone, but I have fun with it.
And you buy those little ones.
And I don't know, but human living is full of that. Whatever we do every day, you're playing the game with it, and it's fine. It's there because it has value in your life. Everything that comes up has value, but the value is not in the thing. It's in the being that's present playing that game.
Right. I look at it like it keeps things interesting.
Did you say what?
I said, I look at it like it keeps things interesting. The
Yeah.
game keeps it interesting. If everything was harmonious and it would be, it's like the
You'd be
flat line.
fast asleep.
It'd be the flat line as opposed to, the ups and downs that we experience. That is the only way we can see it for our own growth and development.
Well, yeah, it's called living.
Yeah.
Life is activity, vitality,
Yeah.
action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So join the fray, play.
You can't not.
All right. And in Science and Health, on page 117, Mary Baker Eddy said, God is spirit. Therefore, the language of spirit must be and is spiritual. Science attaches no physical nature and significance to the supreme being or his manifestation. Mortals alone do this.
Yeah, and that's a quote. Mrs. Eddy would write that in different language today. But what she's actually saying is the whole language picture. That's what she's talking about when she says the mortals, human beings, the belief that there's something living outside of consciousness.
Right.
We play that game, but there isn't any. I live and move and have being mentally, says Margaret Laird, and always have. So all the life, truth, intelligence, substance, etc., is infinite mind, self-manifesting, reflectively present as man.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in Mind is the Athlete on page 19, you wrote, consciously aware of our being, we live reflectively with dominion and freedom. And that's when we give up our attachments and our judgments and our like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Consciously aware is the key word there. The key. When you're aware, then you live reflectively with peace and joy and power.
Yeah.
When you're asleep at the switch, you got the challenge of, oh dear, the stress of what am I going to do now? Yeah. How did this happen to me? Who did this?
Right.
How dare they?
Right.
All that stuff.
Okay. And unconscious to our own powerful presence as being itself being, we pursue our living dualistically, unwittingly. We then become victims of our own ignorance. Again, that's for Mind is the Athlete on page 19. And that's part of where stress comes from.
Yep.
Is the not I. That's not me. It's over there. That's not me. That's out there. Not over here, over there.
In this book that I've mentioned before, Living Consciously, the first chapter that the guy wrote is called, just a minute, Introducing Myself. And he goes on and he talks about everything that's going on. And he tells you, that's who I am.
Yeah.
There isn't anything going on that isn't my being.
Yeah.
My friend, my job, he's a professor in a college. My students, my classroom, my profession. Yeah. It's all me. This is myself, capital S. And there isn't anything going on outside of that. And he says, I don't have any capacity to live you. I don't even know for sure there is a you.
Right.
I have to live it all as myself. And think of the respect I have for it then. Think of the loving care I'm going to give it all.
Yeah.
It has a whole different flavor when I recognize this is myself I'm talking to. This is myself I'm dealing with. Yeah. This negotiation is with myself. This conversation is with myself. Yeah. A whole different flavor to your living when you can see that the human picture of many is the conscious infinitude of one.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that.
All right. Now, in Christian Science Re-Explored on page 63, line 7, Margaret wrote, the word God means absolutely nothing without its idea or self-expression, since truth or reality is infinity, a ceaseless willing of the will to be.
Yep. It's the ceaseless action of being. Yep.
And Mary Baker Eddy wrote on page 123, starting on line 12 of Science and Health, divine science resolves things into thoughts and replaces the objects of material sense with spiritual ideas.
Yep.
And I don't know that it replaces anything, though. It just acknowledges the spiritual nature of everything, doesn't it?
It actually replaces it because the objects of sense aren't living there.
I know. That's what I'm saying. There wouldn't be any replacement if it doesn't exist.
Yeah, but you don't know that. If you lived that, it'd be a whole different story.
Right.
When you look around, you really think there's a dining room table there,
right,
with dinner on it.
Yeah.
Well, that gets replaced when you're living your science. And that way you eat what would be helpful to you. You
Right.
do what would be worthwhile. It's
Yeah.
a whole different picture. It
Well,
isn't,
it would
you
be
don't deny it, you replace it with the fact of what it is. If all is infinite mind, whole, perfect, and complete, then my dining room table is going to have a meal that will be a blessing,
right.
not something I have to worry about. Oh dear, did I have enough whatever? Vegetables, fruit, meat,
Yeah.
whatever.
Okay.
All of that stuff gets handled when you replace what you're looking at with the fact instead of your belief about what it is.
Right. Okay. The verity of mind shows conclusively how it is that matter seems to be, but not.
It all seems to be. It seems to be Betty sitting here, but that's not true. That's just the way it looks.
Okay.
It seems to be communication, and that's not really true. It's an all-knowing, all-present, one infinite intelligence functioning.
Yeah.
So that really addresses all of the things that we think we don't know how to do this. I live a lot with that in this technical world where I really haven't made any headway much with technical expertise. But what I discovered is I have a whole world around me that knows all about that stuff and takes care of it. And I'm lucky to have that because I really haven't paid that much attention. But I can see that one way or the other, you run your world. If you don't do it as Betty, you do it as Betty's universal presence as a child, as a neighbor, as a world around her that supports well-being.
Right. Yeah. And then in your book, Mind is the Athlete, on page 19, you wrote, not understanding our source, we personalize our living, believing we possess and embody these qualities physically, thus denying the power present as universal consciousness.
Exactly.
It's not about this at all.
No.
It's just not about this at all. There's something so much more present that that's so much more the divinity present that is all, that is sourcing this look. And the circumstances and everything else is the only way that I can see them. And if I can allow that to be, that all of that just shows up in wholly new and different ways.
You know, in a really graphic example of what that all is saying is when you were learning to tie your shoe.
Yeah.
You were focused on exactly what your fingers had to do to get that to happen.
Yep.
And then you learned to do it. And you did it several times. And pretty soon you give it no attention at all, but your shoes are tied.
Right. I learned to tie them. And I remember I learned to tie them in Sunday school. They were red stride rights.
Yeah. Okay.
The one thing I can credit Sunday school with.
Okay. But really and truly, when you get the spiritual fact of even the tiniest little portion of your daily living, what you find is that you're an expert at that point in that particular little thing. And that understanding frees you from labor, from concern, from something you think you can't do. There's a lot going on there. But we just toss it off and walk on, not recognizing what's really happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The wonder present. I'm present to that in my own experience of things now, where at the beginning it all seems like, oh my God, that is such a mystery. And then as I start to get more experience, it's like, oh, okay, well that's not such a mystery. I can deal with that. And then more and then more. And then pretty soon it just starts to all make sense in a whole new way, where,
You,
a few weeks earlier, it was a big mystery and a big old like, oh my God, that's so complicated.
yeah. And I think about that with you, with your boat.
Yeah.
When you bought that boat a year ago or so, it was like, oh my gosh, what is this? What is this little thing? What
It
does this
wasn't
do?
little.
The boat's big, but I mean, you got these little gadgets you work with.
Right.
And pretty soon it's amazing what freedom you have with the boat.
Yeah.
When you bought it, you couldn't move it an inch. Now you can go all around San Diego Bay with it.
Yeah.
I mean, huge. A little understanding, it makes all the difference in the world
Yeah.
in anything.
Right. And that's it. It's just being willing.
That's right.
So very good. Well, I don't see any questions. I want to thank you guys a lot. That's all we have for today. Next week, we've got more fun subjects coming up. But if you've got stress going on, my thing is look for where there's not I going on in your world, where you are not the world you walk through, where you're clear. That's over there. And this is over here. And I've got to protect and I got to lower my stress because all that world out there. And wherever that not I is, that's where stress has the capacity to impact you. And where you start to own your world and walk through the world you walk through and really challenge yourself. Aha, this is my own divine being. Now you've got a whole different level and stress will not be a concern.
Yeah. I think of a little simple example. When Mrs. Laird was talking with her teacher, Bicknell Young, she was going on and on about something she really wanted to discuss with him. And he listened for a while. And then he said to her, who's talking? You or Margaret? And she says, that put it in a whole different light.
Right. Yeah. So just look at who's talking. Anyways, that's your homework. Take it on. We'll see you this time, Tuesday next week, 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Central. And until then, take on the not I and be all of it. See you then.